What's up, guys? Ben here. We're bringing you our final video for the teams that didn't qualify for champs. We're going to go ahead and review their season and talk a little about off-season prospects. The team we're talking about today is the Florida Mutineers. Let's dive in and see how these guys didn't qualify for champs and what they should do going forward with their team. Coming out of Cold War, a game where Florida was not too bad, top 8 team most of the season. They had Neptune, they had Havoc. Neptune was having a pretty good season, second year with Big Wake, and SKYZ is doing his thing. They end up actually opting to make some decent changes to this team. Neptune went off to New York. Havoc was on the bench and then was gone. So they ended up with a completely sort of new roster with 2 new players. They brought in Reese Vivid, who had finished off the season on Dallas Empire, and they brought in Dave Patty. And off the bat, like, I think a lot of people, myself included, looked at this team and were like, oh, well, there's 3 ARs on this team. That's odd. And Reese Vivid, who plays really fast, I'm not sure how this is going to work. And I think ultimately that might have been sort of a poor decision on their part. They really weren't an amazing respawn team for most of the season, but let's talk in specific about the events and sort of their ride on how they got here. So Major 1 qualifiers, they pull up, they're 2-3. They have a loss against London, loss against Thieves, loss against Toronto, but they beat Paris and Seattle. Okay showing, but a lot of their teams went 2-3. And unfortunately, with how tiebreakers work, they end up having to start in losers bracket for Major 1. And unfortunately, at that event, they run into a Boston team that had lost to FaZe, and they lose a heartbreaker in game 5. And they pull up, play 1 series, and you're out, your last place. Not the best of starts of the season for this Florida team. We get to Major 2 qualifiers, another 2-3 stage from them, but this time they benefit by the set of tiebreakers, and they actually are able to get in with the 7th seed. They lose to FaZe, they lose to Boston again, they lose to Optic Texas, but they are able to beat LAG in New York in 3-0 fashion. That probably helped their map count and how they were able to get that tiebreaker. They pull up to Major 2 in Minnesota. They have a good showing on first day against London. They 3-0, and they pull up on Saturday and they struggle against Boston again, drop it in a game 5er and down to losers bracket. And this is where it got a little bit of a surprising run. They play a Texas team that had 2 wins coming out of losers bracket after losing to Seattle, and Florida's actually able to take care of business against this Optic team. Probably a massive upset in a tournament that we'd seen a lot of upsets in already. They're able to advance to the next round. Unfortunately for Florida, that's it. They do run up against an LAG team that was like on S&D number 7 of their 10 S&D win streak, and LAG were able to take it last map. But for Florida, a lot of positives, right? You're able to get top 4. You're now got a decent amount of points going into the back half of the season. Feeling pretty good about your team comp and things to improve on. And Florida actually plays pretty good at Pro-Am, right? So they pull up, they're in Group B. They take care of business again versus Optic. They beat Toronto Academy EU, and they are able to beat the Minnesota Rockers. So they get 3-0 in their group. Unfortunately for them, they run into Toronto Ultra. We're playing pretty decent COD this tournament, and they lose again in another game 4, 3-1 Toronto, and Florida go home with a top 8. But okay, it's not too bad, right? You're feeling good about points. You're like on the COD line, but we're playing some top 6 COD that should get us to champs. That being said, though, whilst they're doing that, they're dropping 10 points here and there in all of these online qualifiers. Another 2-3, right? But again, they're able to sneak in with the 7th seed because of tiebreakers. Florida gets 3-2. They do beat Boston this time around. They beat LAG, but they lose to Minnesota. They lose to Optic Texas finally, and they lose to Seattle. They play Optic Texas again when they get to LAN, and once again, Optic Texas is unable to beat them. I'm not sure, like, this is one of those like weird ones. Every year we get these weird matchups where you're like, this team should not consistently beat this team. Florida consistently beating Optic Texas this year on LAN was one of those. They beat them in a game 5, sending Optic to losers. They run into a strong Seattle team, the eventual event winners, and lose in a map 4 to them, bouncing them down to the losers bracket. And once again, Florida's unable to do it against Toronto on LAN. They get 3-0, and they're out of the tournament with a top 6 placing. Florida ended up doing something interesting for Major 4. They ended up making 2 changes. MajorManiak's running the bench in Minnesota. They go ahead and grab him off that deal. They end up sending Reese Vivid to Boston, and they pick up 2 Real. Now, I know ASIM was supposed to be in 2 Real spot, but I wasn't a big fan of this move, to be honest. From my personal opinion, I still don't quite understand why Reese left or was traded. I would love to know what happened there. The Mike thing for Dave, I kind of understand. They were struggling in S&D. Mike's a little bit better of an S&D player, but they brought in a player 2 Real that was playing okay in challengers, and they kind of gave him a really tough draw, and he didn't really play that great individually, and we'll get to there in a second. So okay, you pull up to Major 4 qualifiers. You're like kind of in the mix. You still have some work to do, again, because you keep dropping these online points. You know, in some of these series, Florida could have another 20 or 30 CDL points, and this would be a different conversation. In Major 4 qualifiers, they were able to get a 3-2 placing. Unfortunately for them, like all of the other teams sort of around their area, you know, London, sort of around the COD line, Boston, LA Thieves, Minnesota Rocker, Toronto, were all kind of playing similar good COD. So the 3-2, yes, you got in a winner's bracket again, but you didn't really gain ground on anyone else. They did lose to London and New York during this Major 4 qualifier stage. Okay, those 2 teams are playing good online, but you beat Thieves, You beat Minnesota, you beat Paris, just some good results. And at that point, I'm like, okay, you know, maybe this team's going to make it in. They've got a shot. And it starts out actually pretty good for them in Major 4, right? They pull up to New York and they beat Boston in Game 5. They run against a tough New York team that's really riding that home momentum and they need to win this event in order to qualify. And they lose to New York. And now it sort of becomes a 2-horse race between Florida and New York for who's going to get that final 8 spot for champs. And it gets even worse for Florida when FaZe beat them. And so now Florida's hoping and praying, look, they need New York not to win another series. New York's got to go ahead and get bounced. If they get 10 more CDL points, it's done. Unfortunately, New York beats Thieves like early on Sunday, and that's that. New York qualify. New York do eventually end up losing the event to LA Thieves, but that New York series, I think, was sort of a big kind of miss for them. They had an opportunity. If they'd gotten top 3, it was pretty much in the bag at that point, but they don't let it work. I think taking a look at Florida's sort of overall stats this season, it kind of speaks towards, I think, this issue. A couple of things of note here. 1, 2-7 in round 11s is wild. Just think about that. A couple of those round 11s go a different way. Maybe they're sitting here qualifying for champs. Overall, from a series and map win perspective, like I would say you could argue there's a role where they actually got lucky to be in the mix because they really did not have a winning record this season. They got by all those 2 and 3s and getting decent seedings when they went to majors instead of, you know, being in a bottom seed and getting bounced and getting top 12. And you look at the game mode stats and it's mixed, man. Hardpoint, I mean, basically average, below average. Control, same thing. S&D, they really struggled in all season. Kind of just nothing really to write home about with these map records. It's even more interesting when you look at their game records. Actually a pretty good Game 1 team this year. I know they play a lot of Bocage is Game 1, but I think the struggle points for them was Game 2. They were not going up 2-0 enough in these series. And the Game 4 thing is really criminal. You only won 26% of your Game 4s. It means you're losing a lot of 3-1s, which we saw, and they're sending a lot of series to Game 5 when they couldn't close out. So because Big Wake and Skys are on the back end of deals, they're both going to be free agents this offseason. I think Skys probably, I see him sticking. The Big Wake thing is a big question mark to me, right? Big Wake's a guy who's got a lot of upside. He played pretty good this season, but a lot of other teams who maybe have more money to spend may be in his ear, and it's possible that Florida's not going to match whatever he's getting externally. In addition, they've got team options on 2 Real, MajorManiak, and Dave Patty, but if you take a look at their overall stats, especially for 2 Real, MajorManiak, I mean, are you really going to renew these guys? I would say maybe they'd be better off fit somewhere else, and they dropped Dave Patty mid-season, so unless they're dropping Skys, you know, I don't really see it. I think this Florida team could look completely differently next season if they don't keep either Big Wake or Skys. Like, this could be a complete squad wipe, completely new young roster, or maybe they're able to keep Big Wake and Skys and they find more compatible players. Really, my big thing is I'd like to see this team get a little bit faster, right? I would like to see them find a more true flex, move Big Wake to more of a true flex role, and get 2 more really good subs around them. Play at pace. I think this team would really excel on that point. The S&D thing this season was also a big miss for them. I think losing Havoc and losing Neptune from last season was a big reason why they struggled in S&D this year. And yes, they played a little bit better when they brought Mike in, but I just don't think Mike's probably a good fit for this roster either. So I think in sum total, we're going to have to wait and see what happens with this Florida situation. I don't think they're a team that's going to be one of the first dominoes to fall. They're going to have to wait and see if Big Wake and Skys are willing to come back, and then everything else is going to form around that. One kind of final thing for me on this Florida stuff, I see a lot of stuff on Reddit and social media about Ogre 2. From my understanding of the Florida situation, a lot of their roster building issues have come around the financial support around the team. So I feel like it's a little unfair to throw Ogre 2 under the bus. But that being said, I do think we are allowed to question some of the moves they have made this season. I think bringing in Dave to start off the season was a little bit of a question mark. And I still quite wonder with the Reese Vivid thing if maybe there was an option to keep him instead of shipping him to Boston. Well, that'll do it, guys, for this video. Let me know what you think. What do you think Florida should do in the comments? If you can like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate that. And we'll see you guys in the next one.